it's Stephanie and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Today's video is going to be my tips for nursing job interviews. If you guys don't know, I am about to graduate from my accelerated BSN program this semester, and I do already have a job lined up. I went through 2 full interview processes with 2 different hospitals, and obviously it worked out in my favor. So I'm here today to share with you all of my tips for how to do well in your interview and some things to consider when looking for nursing jobs. So let's jump into it. First up, this might be the most obvious of obvious to some of you, but make sure you're researching the program that you're applying for or that you're interviewing for. They're gonna ask you questions and they wanna see if you line up with their mission and vision statements and their values and things like that. So make sure you look up the mission and the vision statement for the hospital you're applying to. Make sure you're researching the specific unit you're applying to, like read the unit description in the job application so you know exactly what to expect for what unit you're going to be hired on. If it's a unit that is very similar to a unit you did your rotation on, make sure to come up with some experiences that match up with what you think you might see at that new unit. Also, something to consider is, especially in your last rotation of nursing school, try and make a list of patient encounters you had. Times that you thought you did really well, times that you thought you went above and beyond for a patient, times that you thought you advocated for a patient, maybe a time that you feel like you didn't advocate as well for a patient, or time you made a mistake, something like that. Those are types of questions I was asked on my interview process, and if you take notes of those experiences while they're happening in clinical and kind of make a list for yourself to look over before your interviews, you won't have to try and think of those scenarios on the spot. Kind of going off of that, think about your answers to very common interview questions ahead of time. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why do you want to work at whatever hospital? You know, again, that goes into researching the hospital that you're applying for. Why do you want to work on this unit? Why do you want to work on this specialty? Things like that. Why did you want to be a nurse? Why did you go to nursing school? All of those things are very common things that they're going to ask you, especially in like a first round interview. And you don't want to sound like you're just like rambling, picking an answer off the top of your head. So definitely think through your answers to those questions ahead of time so you can have something kind of prepared, but not so prepared that it sounds like you're reading off a script when they ask you these questions. Also, something that might seem kind of obvious, but bring your resume with you. If you're going to have an in-person interview, make sure you bring a few copies of your resume with you so you can give it to them when you get there in case they don't have a copy with them or they forgot to print one out, whatever. Make sure you have them ready, especially if they ask for one. It would look bad on you if you didn't have a copy ready for them. So bring a couple, 3 to 5 copies, depending on how many people you're interviewing with, so you have them. If you're interviewing virtually like I did, I just made sure that I kept my resume in a tab on my computer already opened. So if I needed to send it as an attachment in Zoom or quickly send it in an email to them after the interview, I already had it open and ready. And then I was also just able to scan over it really quickly before the interview to see exactly what I put on there in case they ask me about any of my experiences on my resume. Obviously, you're only putting things on your resume that you've actually done or actually have the certification for, the experience in, but I like to make sure that I just read over exactly what I said my responsibilities were for each of my jobs, just in case they ask about a specific responsibility I had at a job. Again, this one might seem obvious, but make sure that you're dressing and acting professional. Especially with things being over Zoom nowadays, it's easy for things to feel a little more casual because you're not face to face with someone, but make sure your background is clear of clutter. I obviously have just a random sweatshirt hanging off there. I would take that down if I was interviewing with someone, you know, make sure you have a clean background, you're in a quiet area, you look professional. It doesn't just look like you rolled out of bed and opened the Zoom, you know. Make sure you just look the part. You know, I, for my interview, wore full business casual, even though they weren't gonna see below my waist, just because I really wanted it to feel like a true interview that I was doing in person. Obviously, that's personal preference, but that's what I did. And I feel like it really helped my confidence because I felt like I was dressing for the job I wanted. Something else that I highly recommend is come prepared with questions to ask them. They might not cover every single thing you want to know. And sometimes it's hard to think of a question on the spot when they get to the end of all of their information and they say, okay, what questions do you have for me? So either jot down some questions that you know you want to ask them before the interview. My go-to questions were, what does the patient ratio look like on a floor like this? How would you say the environment of the floor is? Is there good teamwork? You know, hopefully they wouldn't say no to that question, but it shows that you're interested and working as part of a team. And I think that that is a really important quality in a nurse. I also would ask things like, when can I expect to hear back from you? Or what's the next step in this process? Things like that that really show that you're interested in continuing along with the process and that you're interested in moving forward in the job. Also, something with COVID that might not be possible, but I still recommend asking about anyway is, can you come tour the unit in person? Can you shadow on the unit in person for even just a few hours to kind of get a feel for the unit yourself, actually see the unit that you might take a job on? Now, unfortunately, I was unable to do so because of the hospital's COVID policies. I was unable to be able to tour or shadow in person. So that's something to consider too. Like, is it make it or break it for you to come and see the unit in person, especially if it's in a hospital you've never been to before. You never did a clinical rotation. You've never even been to that state, whatever. One last tip for during the interview is make sure you're paying attention to the person or people's names that are interviewing you. Jot it down at the beginning if you need to help you remember, but make sure you're using their name. You know, when you say, thank you, Stephanie, at the end of the interview, it shows that you were really engaged with the conversation and it makes things just a little more personal when you use someone's name when you're talking to them. It makes them feel more important, it makes them feel special, and it just brings that connection closer. Last but not least is my tip for after the interview. Definitely send a follow-up thank you if you know the person's email, if you have any sort of way to contact them. Obviously, if you're in person, you can just, hand them a thank you card or give one to the secretary on the unit to give to them once you leave or something like that. Or I think it's totally acceptable to send a thank you email if you have their email address, within the first 24 hours after the interview, and just thank them for the opportunity to talk with them and chat with them, and you're looking forward to hearing back from them and or moving forward in the process. Something like that really shows that you're invested in that opportunity. All right, I think those are all of my nursing job interview tips for you guys. I'm sure there are so many tips that I missed in this video. So if you have any tips that you want to share or specific questions about things, definitely leave them in the comments section below. I would love for the comment section just to be a really great conversation between people and a really great place for advice if you're looking for more advice than what I provided here in this video today. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.